So with the unfathomable amount of money that the Super Mario Bros. Movie made, it was only a matter of time until the sequel machine got to work on it. Of course, we all knew this was coming not just from simple logic, but also the fact that Nintendo revealed that they were making a follow-up to this movie over a year ago. But how exactly would they be approaching it? Would it simply be The Mario Bros. Movie 2? A Donkey Kong movie? There were a lot of possibilities as to how they could go about this. Well, it was quite recently, as of the time I'm making this, that we finally got an answer to this question. The sequel to the hugely successful Super Mario Bros. Movie is... the Super Mario Galaxy movie. Okay, given how my most popular video ever consists of me railing against the Mario movie in favor of a far superior fan-made counterpart, you'd probably assume that I have some thoughts about this, and you are definitely correct in that assumption. As many of you have probably guessed already, I was not the biggest fan of the Mario movie. The performances were solid and the art direction was amazing, but this movie has one of the most rushed scripts I've ever seen, with characters basically saying, "Oh, let's go here, now let's do this," without having the necessary development or interactions that would warrant doing them. I highly doubt I'll ever do a full review, as everything I could possibly say about it has already been said, but in my opinion, this movie is a 6 out of 10 on a good day. And it's because of this massive mediocrity that I'm incredibly cautious about the upcoming Mario Galaxy movie. Because the Mario Galaxy games are some of my favorite of all time. I've 100%ed both of them, and they still hold up amazingly well even over a decade later. So knowing this, you can probably see why I'm nervous, given my thoughts on the previous movie. But before I talk about my worries in detail, let me prove that I'm fair by listing off some things that I think are promising. Just like the first movie, the art looks great, and moving the setting to space can give the artist a chance to go even crazier and experiment with different ideas and places. I also think that most of the main cast returning is a net positive. While it's very obvious they were initially cast for their big names, they still gave good performances with what they had. I also agree with the common sentiment that Charlie Day and Jack Black were the best parts of the main cast, but not enough people talk about how much Kevin Michael Richardson crushed it as Kamek. And finally, Brian Tyler returning as composer will definitely help this movie, as he did a great job in the first. Taking both classic and newer Mario songs and putting a movie-appropriate spin on them was a really good approach, and I haven't seen enough people appreciate his work. But it's also on the topic of music that one of my biggest concerns comes to light. If you saw my corporate versus creative media video, you'll probably remember that one of my biggest issues with the Mario movie was its awful use of licensed music. Now I want to be clear that there's nothing inherently wrong with licensed music. I watched a lot of Regular Show growing up, which was a show that made great use of licensed music. Here's the thing though. This is Mario, something that had its own established identity prior to the movie, with music being a big part of that identity. There's 40 years of Mario music to draw from. You shouldn't need any licensed music for a movie like this. This was already concerning for the first Mario movie, but the thought of this is even more worrying if the subject of adaptation is Super Mario Galaxy, because I stand by the belief that Mario Galaxy has one of the best soundtracks in gaming, with songs that are big and bombastic like Gusty Garden Galaxy, to much slower and calming tracks like Space Junk Galaxy. They have a literal goldmine to work with here, and knowing Illumination, they could forego all of it in favor of playing Despacito. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but remember, these are the same executives that ignored an amazing piece of music that drew from various Donkey Kong media in favor of playing Take On Me, so you can't say that this is an invalid concern. And then there's the story. Galaxy is one of the more lore-heavy Mario games, so they have the chance to make huge narrative improvements over the first movie, but I'm worried that it might just be the same story, but in space. It's no secret that Illumination and Nintendo both really like money, and the first movie proved that they can have the most bare-bones narrative possible and pull in an absolute load. so why fix what ain't broke? They have the chance to listen to criticism about the first movie's story, but is there any monetary reason to do so? No. And that's a very scary thought, knowing how much potential this movie has narratively. And that point brings us to something that I'm both looking forward to, but I'm also pretty cautious about. And that is Rosalina. She definitely has the potential to be an interesting character when not confined to a non-story focused video game, such as diving into more of her backstory with things like the storybook, while also adding original elements that one could only see in a movie. I've always liked the more quiet and reserved type characters, as it's all the more satisfying when they finally come out of their shell. And I can certainly see that happening with Rosalina. Maybe we can see her become more adept at talking to people after only being surrounded by Lumas for years. And knowing how Lumas are in this universe,
there's no escape. The only hope is the sweet relief of death.
Yeah, she might need that. But that's only one of many possible character paths I can see them taking for Rosalina. And with that thought lies the possibility that they could totally butcher her. Make her one of those characters who are just there, hint at a bunch of interesting things happening only to do nothing with them, just like Peach in the first movie, or have her be voiced by Awkwafina. There are many ways to make Rosalina interesting, but a ton of ways to mess her up, which is why I consider her to be the biggest wild card element this movie has so far. Overall, when it comes to what I think of this upcoming movie, I wouldn't say I'm cautiously optimistic, but just cautious. I certainly think that there's potential for a good film, but that was also the case for the first movie, which ended up disappointing me. Though I am genuinely interested to hear what everyone thinks. Are you more optimistic than I am, or are you just done with the new MCU? Let's talk in the comments. But until next time, see ya later.